everyone, and welcome. I am your host, Erin Moody, here on behalf of Orlando Insight Group. On each of our episodes, we dive into real conversations with technology leaders, innovators, and experts who are shaping the future of IT, data, and cybersecurity. Our goal is simple: to give you practical insights, real-world strategies, and expert perspectives that you can use to drive smarter business decisions and stronger results. So thank you so much for tuning in. We are so excited to have our guest today, LeClerc. She leads open source strategy at IBM, where she's focused on building strong communities around watsonx and open data tech. We are so excited to have you, Allie, and dive into your journey and learn a little bit more from you today.
Thanks. Excited to be here, Erin.
Awesome. So we will just jump right in. Also, I want to mention we have Henry Clavo on as well. So this is our first time doing a three-person interview. So hopefully we'll have some added dimension there with Henry being on.
Awesome. It's really fun.
All right, perfect. So let's jump into kind of what you do at IBM. So you're leading open source strategy for IBM's watsonx portfolio. What does that actually mean in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me just start by saying, first of all, excited to be here and excited to kind of share my journey in open source. I've worked in open source almost my entire career, so it's been over a decade now. Working primarily in deep data infrastructure, open source projects and the vendors behind them. And so I'm at IBM now. 2 years ago, I worked for a startup called Ahana. We were the Presto company, and we were acquired by IBM, which was a fantastic process to go through. And now I'm an IBMer now for 2 years. And here it's been really amazing and a really refreshing journey to be, first of all, part of a big company, but right. Second of all, part of a big company that takes open source really seriously. And so, for the last 2 years, my focus has really been on making sure that here at IBM, the data team that I work on is very focused on making sure that we're making contributions to open source, that we're being good stewards of open source. Not only do we use open source in our product here that we sell, but we also are very big believers in contributing back to open source, growing communities around open source projects, and making sure that adoption of those projects continues to grow. And so I'm sure we'll dive into the specifics, but there are some particular projects that I'm focused on. I mentioned Presto, which is an open source SQL query engine. That's actually how Henry and I got introduced. Henry is
very cool.
community member and a Presto user, and we actually met at an open source event, PrestoCon. So I think that's a full circle moment why we're all here today.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, we were. She invited me to present on the use of Presto on a AWS cloud system. So I gave a presentation that a couple of years ago. So it was great. But we would love to hear more about the events coming up and what you're working on.
Of course, I'll have to plug those for sure. But yeah, so Presto is one. Velox is another. If you don't know Velox, it's a very new, very powerful project coming out of Meta. And so it's a native execution library that engines like Presto, like Spark can use to kind of better the performance, all native execution, C++. Apache Gluten, I'm very excited about. This is also a newer project. This is basically Spark with Velox on the back end. We have the founder, the person who created Gluten now at IBM, and a team of about a dozen or so engineers working on Apache Gluten. I am super excited for Gluten. I think like any company using that has like a big Spark deployment should be checking out Apache Gluten. It's a drop-in replacement, and it's all about price performance and performance. And it's a new project. We're seeing some adoption this year, which I'm excited about, and I'm excited to just share more about Gluten. So if you haven't heard about Gluten, check it out. And then, of course, Iceberg. I think Iceberg, everybody knows Iceberg, but that's another key piece of our stack here at IBM and another key open source project that we are involved in and want to do more in. Milvis, another one, open source, vector database. And so we use a lot of open source tech at IBM, and a few of these projects that I just named, we are very heavily involved in terms of the open source project itself. So high level, what I do is help IBM and my team make sure that we're contributing upstream to open source. We're involved in the community. We're working to become contributors and committers, and really just making sure the project continues to grow and adoption grows for all of those projects.
Very cool. Thank you so much for going through all that. Sounds like there's a lot of interesting things happening. So definitely encourage everybody to go check out all the things that Ali mentioned. So we've talked about all the stuff that you're doing with open source. How would you say that IBM's approach to it is different from some of the other big tech players?
Yeah, I think I have a very strong point of view on how to do open source the right way when you work at a big enterprise vendor type of company. Some mistakes that I've seen, this is, just being an open source for the last decade, right? I've seen companies come in and say, if you want to use this open source project, you have to pay us. Or they put a lot of walls around the technology, right? You can only use a subset of the technology. You can't use it all. And so I think that makes it hard for adoption, for the community to grow. IBM has been, like I mentioned, phenomenal in terms of their support of open source. And one of the biggest things I think that shows that you really mean business when it comes to open source is you just want the technology to be better. Obviously we're selling a product and it's great to have people buying the product, right? But we also have a vested interest in making sure the open source projects that are part of our product are really good. And, as an example, Presto, right? Presto, like I mentioned, distributed SQL engine. It's a key piece of our watsonx.data platform. But we also have teams focused just on Presto, and we have folks working just on open source Presto. So making sure that the open source piece of it is good enough that anybody can pick it up and start using it in their own environments. And so this philosophy kind of translates across the entire stack. And it's not just about, building features that are going to be proprietary, right? We build features and we put them back into open source. And I think that's the key there, is contributing back, upstream into the project, making the project better. And then another part of it is the partnerships that we've built, right? And so it's not just an IBM project. We're working closely with Meta, who I've mentioned. We work closely with Uber, Intel, just to name a few. And so it's that kind of cross collaboration across these really big companies that's helping to drive the project at a much faster rate. It's good for everyone. It's good for us as companies that use the technologies in our products, but it's also good for the community to get kind of like, the engineering resources from some of the biggest tech companies in the world working together to further the project. And so I think that's really just goodness. And that's how I look at it. And that's how IBM looks at it. And so, the past 2 years, we have really accomplished a lot within these open source projects. And I'm really excited about what's coming. I think the roadmap is super innovative. And, I mentioned Velox. I think there's a lot going on with Velox and this idea of composable data management systems. And you'll see more coming out from us, but it's a really fun time to be part of the data infra world. And of course, with all the AI and workloads that we need to support, I think it's only going to get faster and more performant.
Very cool. So you talked a lot about the community and how the open source is community led. Do you have maybe one moment that you can share with us that kind of made you step back and say, like, this is why community led development matters and why it's so important?
I mean, like I said, what's really great about working in open source is that it's not just one person, one company, like doing things on their own, right? You really do have to come together as a community of contributors, of end users, of committers, right? And so it's not just one person's benefit or interest that you're going to be benefiting. And it's going to be challenging. Of course, we come to, we have conversations all the time with, well, this feature we think will be better, but maybe this other feature will be better for a company, but this feature will be better for the community. So how do we kind of make sure those interests come together in a way that's good for everybody? And I think those are really healthy discussions that happen all of the time. And that's one of the biggest benefits of open source is you are building together as a community. It's not just in the benefit or the interest of one big company. And I think that's why, again, like why we're able to move much faster and really address true community needs as opposed to just trying to make money.
Yeah, that's definitely a balance.
Yes.
Obviously, the company has to make money to survive, but
obviously. There is a balance. I think you bring up a good point, this balance, right? I mean, a lot of people ask me, okay, if you're so invested in open source, then how does IBM make money on their product? Yeah. And this is a good question that like all open source vendors have to figure out at some point. My philosophy is if you are a good steward in the open source community, meaning you're making really solid contributions, you're helping users get started, you're answering questions. As an IBMer, I'm out there doing that. People that want to use the technology that may not have the resources, the knowledge, the expertise to do it, can use a product like IBM watsonx.data, where they pay for it, they get the support, they get to use Presto without having to manage the complexities of it, right? And so there is a really nice kind of organic way to get customers to buy your products in open source, but it has to be it has to be natural. It can't be a forced situation. And so that's how I found, for me and for the companies I've worked for, that's how it's worked best, is just being kind of authentic, being helpful, showing up in the community in a good way.
Yeah, I love that approach. I work and do a lot of things in marketing, and that's what we see a lot. People don't like to be directly sold all the time. Exactly. So I love that you're providing value first, and then because you've provided that value, people are like, oh, they have to be a great company. So let me check out how I can work with them.
Absolutely.
Very cool. So you had mentioned that the company that you were working with before was acquired by IBM. So I was curious how you'd mentioned the transition was great, but what was it like going from a startup in a smaller company to joining a company as huge as IBM? I'm sure there had to be some things there.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an adjustment. It's been a lot of learning. I have to say, like, the company I was with last, I was the second hire, right? And so we were a very small company. And 2 years later, we were acquired. And so, first of all, that was an amazing run, like so much fun. But yeah, transitioning to a big company there is a lot of adjustments. There are, like any company, there's pros and cons, right? I'll have to say I was nervous. I was nervous to join IBM, but I have been so pleasantly surprised, and it's been really wonderful. First of all, the people that work here are really amazing. Everybody cares very deeply about what they're doing, so that's been really wonderful. Like I've said several times now, I wasn't sure how IBM was going to approach open source, but it has been amazing. They, my management team, all the way up to the executives are very heavy supporters of open source and making sure that we do open source the right way. And so it's been, of course you have to get used to, going through many layers to get approvals as opposed to a startup. You just put it, you just go off and run. And if you mess up, you just redo it. But that makes sense. And I think that's why IBM is IBM. I mean, the company's doing phenomenal. I don't know if anybody's been following the stock, but it's been phenomenal. And we're putting out some, really innovative stuff here at IBM. And I think a lot of the times that kind of gets trumped by some of, the Meta and the Microsofts and the OpenAIs and topics, but it's been really impressive to see all of the work that, IBM research has been putting out in terms of AI and the LLM models and all of these things. And the work, obviously, that my team's doing from an open lakehouse perspective has been really fun to be a part of. Just a few months ago, IBM announced the acquisition of DataStax. DataStax is the NoSQL database, and there's a lot of excitement about that. And I think there's going to be a lot coming out about that in the next few months. So stay tuned. So there's a lot going on, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And it's really good, innovative, types of things that are coming out. And I'm really excited for the future here.
That's so awesome. I'm glad to hear that you had a great experience, because I know, like you said, the fear of the unknown, like you don't know how it's going to work. Awesome. How about thinking about like your leadership style? How has that evolved working for a startup versus a large company like IBM? Has anything changed? Anything stayed the same?
It's a great question. I think when you work at startups, you're kind of in go mode, right? And you're building something from scratch. And so I think that context switch for me has been something that I'm adjusting to in terms of, okay, at IBM, I'm actually able to, which is nice, to step back and get more strategic about, how we talk about, in this case, open source, how we approach, new communities that we want to engage with, how we educate like our executives here on open source, right? And so I think there's a lot more of strategic types of work that I'm able to do here. It's kind of, which has been great because it's challenging a new part of my brain, as opposed to, okay, now I gotta make sure we're getting, open source leads coming through, right? And now I gotta run this event, and I'm also running marketing at Ahana, so I gotta make sure that the sales team is getting what they need, right? And so this has been a fun challenge and a new one. And again, I think the skill set of working at a big company is always a good thing for folks to develop. And so that's also been great.
Very cool. All right. So thinking ahead, in your opinion, where do you see open source heading over the next few years, especially with AI in the data space?
I think open source is going to continue to be as important, if not more important. I mean, we've seen the pushback of when things go proprietary, right? From, when AI models, you don't know what's happening underneath the covers. People don't like that. And so, open, and also this whole idea of vendor lock-in is so old. Like, people aren't going to lock in all of their data with one vendor, right? People want the ability to move their data where they want it. I think the idea, it's kind of funny. We were actually having this conversation the other day we talked a lot about, cloud and on-prem and hybrid. And I think the industry kind of swung to be all in on cloud. And now we're kind of seeing this pendulum swing back to more hybrid environments. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of an interesting flavor of the open source. How do I as a company that needs to house their data kind of in their private data centers, but also want to take advantage of the cloud? How can I use open source to make sure that I'm not getting locked in one place? I'm able to move it as I want. And so I think these are all kinds of key considerations that I'm seeing when I talk to our users and customers. I think open source is critical. I'm biased because I work in open source, but I think, tell me a Fortune 500 company, even a startup that's not using open source today. I think everybody uses open source in some component in their infrastructure. And so I think it's just going to continue to be a super important part, critical underpinning of many systems. And it will continue to do that.
Cool. For those that are listening, if they have a company and they're thinking about investing right now, is there an area of open source that you think is more beneficial for companies, or where they should?
We're in the AI world, right? Everybody's talking about AI, Gen AI, RAG use cases. What LLM model are you using? And I think obviously this is the way that the world is headed. People seem to be forgetting about data, and maybe they're not. We just aren't talking about it as much. But I just like to continue talking about the fact that you need data to run your AI models, to run your AI workloads, right? And having a solid data infrastructure to support that is critical. If you do not have that, nothing will work. So my guidance is make sure you're not forgetting about your data. How are you going to be managing that? How are you going to be moving it, right? How are you going to be running ad hoc analytics on your data? And so make sure when you're setting up your next generation data infrastructure platform, that's a key part of it when you're looking to run your AI workloads.
Love it. Oh, that's great advice. So definitely listen to Allie. Get your data in a good spot before you go trying to find the latest and greatest AI tools. Perfect. So I'll kind of pause there. Henry, did you have any questions that you wanted to chime in with for Allie?
I'm curious, since you mentioned DataStack has been acquired, how does the process of integrating their technologies and staff to help you on your projects for open source?
I don't know. We're still in the early days. We're still in the early days, right? And so I think that we announced the acquisition earlier this year, and then there'll be more coming on when it's all done and final and all of these things. I'm excited because, obviously Apache Cassandra has a big community. They are a well-known open source project. And so I'm excited to just get my hands on that a little bit more. And as the team kind of comes on board, I'm sure we'll be working very closely together. I will plug, IBM has a really big developer event. It's called IBM Tech Exchange. It's in Orlando the second week of October. So, and the reason I plug it now, Cassandra, Apache, folks from DataStax will be there talking about Apache Cassandra. We'll obviously have a bunch of sessions on Presto and Gluten and Velox. We'll have NVIDIA and Meta there. Pinterest will be coming to share how they use Gluten. And so it'll be a really great event to showcase much of the open source work we're doing, that DataStax is doing, and that some of the key projects in the open source data space will be coming as well. So IBM Tech Exchange, it's a free to register. It's Monday. Okay. So anybody in the Orlando area, I would love to see you.
Erin's in Florida, so maybe she could make it.
There you go.
Orlando's about 2 hours. It does sound really cool, though. Check it out.
Let me know, Erin.
Your first attendee.
There you go.
Awesome. All right, cool. So Allie, thank you so much for joining us today. You really gave us a lot of cool insights into what's going on with IBM and open source. So we really appreciate you taking the time out. If people want to connect with you or follow up with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Reach me on LinkedIn, Allie LeClerc. You can see my name there. Yeah, connect with me if you're using open source. If you're just starting your open source journey, I love talking open source, and obviously if it's in the data space, even better. But I'm happy to talk anything open source. We do a bunch of in-person events all over the world. So also great way to stay in touch is find me at an event.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, meet you in person.
Yeah.
One coming up in California, I believe, Allie.
What's that?
There's an event coming up for you in California.
Fact, tonight, if you are in the Bay Area, we are hosting a big meetup and a workshop at IBM Silicon Valley Lab. It's posted on my LinkedIn, but yeah, it's free. We are expecting a few hundred people, which will be awesome, and would love to have anybody that's listening now join us. I know it's short notice, but it's tonight, San Jose.
Very cool. That's perfect timing. Yeah, so definitely go check it out. You can tell Allie how much you loved listening to her today.
Amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Allie. Definitely appreciate the time you spent today. That is it for our show today. Thank you guys so much for listening. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure you follow our company page at Orlando Insight Group. And that is where we post all of our events. And we do post regularly just for education about all things tech and data. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Take care, Allie. Bye.
See you. Bye.